The detention cell aboard the Crimson Sovereign was exactly what Sienna Ward had expected. Cold, utilitarian, and designed to break the spirit of whoever occupied it. The walls hummed with the low thrum of the war cruiser's engines, a constant reminder that she was deep in enemy territory with no hope of rescue. She sat on the metal bench that served as both chair and bed, her hands clasped loosely in her lap, breathing slowly to keep her heart rate steady. It had been 3 days since the border skirmish that had destroyed her diplomatic shuttle. 3 days since she'd been pulled from the wreckage and brought aboard this ship. 3 days of silence, of waiting, of wondering when they would finally come for her. The door hissed open without warning. Sienna didn't flinch. She'd trained herself not to give them the satisfaction. Instead, she raised her eyes calmly to observe her visitor. He was massive, even by Zacrian standards. Nearly 7 feet tall, with deep violet skin that seemed to shimmer in the harsh lighting. His armor was ceremonial rather than functional, etched with intricate patterns that marked him as high nobility. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, brilliant amber, currently fixed on her with an intensity that would have made most humans look away. Sienna met his gaze steadily. "You're either very brave or very foolish." "Human," he said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to resonate in her chest. His command of standard was perfect, barely accented. "Most of your kind cannot bear to look upon a Zacrian warrior without trembling." "Then I suppose I'm the exception," Sienna replied evenly. "Though I suspect you didn't come here to discuss my fear response, or lack thereof." Something flickered in those amber eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or interest. He stepped fully into the cell, and the door sealed behind him with a finality that should have terrified her. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, circling her slowly, evaluating. "I am Dreven Cross, Crown Prince of the Zacrian Sovereignty and Commander of the Third Fleet. You are Sienna Ward, Junior Diplomat of the Terran Federation, assigned to the Neutral Zone negotiations." He paused directly in front of her. "Your shuttle violated our territorial boundary. By law, you are a spy. The penalty is execution. My shuttle's navigation systems were damaged by debris from your attack on the civilian transport we were trying to protect." Sienna countered, keeping her voice level despite the ice spreading through her veins. "We transmitted distress signals on all frequencies. You fired anyway." Dreven's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "That transport was carrying weapons to your forces. It was carrying medical supplies and refugees. Children, Prince Dreven. Your sensors would have shown you that if you'd bothered to scan before shooting. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut." Sienna knew she was pushing her luck, but something in her refused to cower. If she was going to die on this ship, she would do it with her dignity intact. "You have no proof of these claims," Dreven said finally, but his voice lacked conviction. "Neither do you," Sienna replied. She stood slowly, careful to keep her movements non-threatening. Even standing, she barely reached his chest. "But we both know the truth, don't we? That transport wasn't a threat. It was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, and your finger was already on the trigger." Dreven moved so fast she barely saw it. One moment he was standing a respectful distance away. The next, his hand was around her throat, lifting her until her feet dangled above the floor. His grip was firm but not crushing, not yet. "A warning. You dare accuse me of murdering innocents?" His voice was dangerously quiet. "I could snap your neck with a thought. I could end your miserable existence right here, right now, and no one would question it. You are my prisoner, human. My property. Your life belongs to me." Sienna's hands came up instinctively, grasping his wrist, but she didn't struggle. Instead, she looked him directly in the eyes and did something he clearly hadn't expected. She smiled, not a mocking smile or a fearful grimace. A gentle, almost sad expression It completely disarmed his anger. "Then do it," she said softly, her voice steady despite her position. "If it would give you peace, if it would undo what happened, if it would bring back those children you pretend you didn't kill, then go ahead. But we both know it won't. It'll just be one more death added to the thousands this war has already claimed. One more weight on your conscience that you'll carry forever." Dreven stared at her, his grip neither loosening nor tightening. Up close, she could see the faint scars on his face, the way his jaw worked as if grinding through thoughts he didn't want to have. His pupils dilated and contracted, amber irises swirling with something that looked almost like anguish. "You should be begging," he said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "Pleading for your life. Offering me information, anything that might save you. That's what prisoners do." "I'm not most prisoners," Sienna replied. "And you're not going to kill me." "How can you possibly know that?" "Because you came here alone. Because you're talking to me instead of just executing the sentence. Because I can see it in your eyes. You don't want to be the monster this war is trying to make you." The words hung in the air between them, dangerous and true. For a long moment, nothing moved except the slight rise and fall of their breathing. Then, slowly, Dreven lowered her back to the ground. His hand remained at her throat, but loosely now, his thumb resting against her pulse point. "Your heart is racing," he observed quietly. "I'm human, not suicidal," Sienna replied. "I'm terrified. I'm just choosing not to show it the way you expect." "Why?" It was a simple question, but Sienna sensed the weight behind it. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about something larger, something neither of them fully understood yet. "Because someone has to break the cycle," she said. "Because if we keep meeting each other's violence with more violence, fear with more fear, this war will never end. Someone has to be brave enough to respond differently." She paused, then added more softly, "Even if it gets them killed." Dreven's hand fell away from her throat entirely. He stepped back, his expression unreadable, warring with emotions that Sacrian warriors were trained from birth to suppress. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "You are either the wisest human I have ever encountered, or the most foolish. I have not yet decided which. Can't I be both?" The corner of his mouth twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. "You will remain here while I investigate your claims about the transport. If you are lying, your execution will proceed as scheduled. And if I'm telling the truth?" Dreven paused at the door, looking back at her with those intense amber eyes. "Then we will have a very different conversation." The door sealed behind him, leaving Sienna alone once more. She sank back onto the bench, her legs suddenly weak, her hands trembling with delayed reaction. She'd just gambled everything on a single read of an enemy prince's character, and she had no idea if she'd won or lost. But as the adrenaline faded, she found herself thinking not about her near-death experience, but about the look in Dreven's eyes. That moment of uncertainty, of questioning. That tiny crack in his warrior's facade. It was, she thought, the most dangerous and hopeful thing she'd ever seen. Outside her cell, Dreven stood with his hand pressed against the wall, breathing carefully. His interrogators would be waiting for his report, expecting him to return with information extracted through approved methods. Instead, he found himself reviewing sensor logs from the transport incident, looking for evidence he wasn't sure he wanted to find. Because if the human was right, if they had killed innocents, he pushed the thought away. But it lingered, persistent as her smile, gentle as her refusal to break. What kind of person faced death with compassion instead of fear? And why did part of him desperately want to find out? The summons came at what Sienna's internal clock insisted was 3 a.m, though time had little meaning in the sterile environment of the war cruiser. 2 guards escorted her through corridors that gleamed with an almost organic sheen, the walls embedded with crystalline structures that pulsed with bioluminescent light. She'd been aboard the Crimson Sovereign for 8 days now, and the architecture still unsettled her. With its blend of technology and something that felt almost alive. They stopped outside a door, marked with symbols she couldn't read. One guard pressed his palm against the panel, and it dissolved into translucent film before reforming behind her as she stepped through. Driven stood at a curved viewport that dominated one wall, his hands clasped behind his back, silhouetted against the stars. He didn't turn as she entered. "You were correct," he said without preamble. "The transport was carrying refugees and medical supplies. Our intelligence was faulty." A pause, weighted with something that might have been regret, or deliberately falsified. Sienna's breath caught. "You're saying someone in your fleet wanted that transport destroyed, knowing what it carried?" "I'm saying that wars are profitable for certain parties who have no interest in peace." Now he turned, and in the starlight, his features seemed softer somehow. Less the stern warrior prince, and more simply a man carrying a burden too heavy for one person. "There are members of the High Council who believe any mercy is weakness, any negotiation is surrender. We have the same problem on our side," Sienna admitted, moving closer to the viewport. The view was breathtaking. A nebula painted the darkness in shades of purple and gold, stellar nurseries where new stars were being born. Profiteers and extremists on both sides, feeding off the conflict. "Which brings me to why you're here." Driven pulled up a holographic display with a gesture. Star charts bloomed in the air between them, focusing on a neutral station at the intersection of 3 territorial boundaries. "In 2 days, there will be preliminary peace negotiations at Station Meridian. The Zacrian delegation requires a human liaison who understands both diplomatic protocol and the reality of this war. Someone who has seen the cost firsthand." Sienna stared at him. "You want me to be your translator?" "I want you to be my conscience," he corrected quietly. "To remind me, when the political games begin, what we're actually fighting for, or what we should stop fighting over. I'm not sure your delegation will appreciate having their prisoner suddenly elevated to diplomatic status. You're not a prisoner anymore. I've reviewed your credentials. You are decorated for negotiating the Talus settlement, and your dissertation on cross-species conflict resolution is considered seminal work in your field. You're qualified for this role." His amber eyes met hers. "And more importantly, you're someone who didn't break when I expected you to. That kind of strength is rare." Sienna processed this, looking for the trap, the angle. But Driven's expression was open in a way she hadn't seen before, vulnerable even. "If I agree, I'll be seen as a traitor by my own people. A human working for the Zacrian Crown Prince? If you agree, you'll be helping end a war that has killed millions on both sides. Does political optics matter more than that?" He had her there, and they both knew it. Sienna had entered diplomatic service precisely because she believed in building bridges, even when it seemed impossible. Especially then. "I'll need guarantees. Communication access to verify my status with Terran Command. Freedom of movement on the station. And I want your word that I can speak freely during negotiations, even if what I say contradicts your position." Driven's lips curved into something almost like a smile. "You negotiate your own captivity. Very well. You have my word, on my honor as Crown Prince and heir to the throne. You will be treated as a full diplomatic envoy under my personal protection. Then I accept." The journey to Station Meridian took 3 days at faster-than-light speeds, and Driven assigned Sienna quarters adjacent to his own in the diplomatic wing. The rooms were far more luxurious than her cell had been. A proper bed with what felt like silk sheets, a bathroom with a sonic shower, even a small sitting area with that same organic-looking furniture the Zacrians favored. But it was the connecting door between their quarters that caught her attention. When she pressed the panel experimentally, it opened to reveal a shared observation lounge, clearly designed for private discussions between the room's occupants. She found Driven there that first evening, seated in a low chair that accommodated his larger frame, staring out at the streaking lights of FTL travel. He'd removed his formal armor, wearing instead a simple tunic that revealed the powerful musculature of his arms and the intricate tattoos that marked his shoulders clan symbols. She guessed, or military honors. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began without looking at her, "about breaking cycles. In Zacrian culture, we have a concept called Vreshkala, the honor debt of blood. When someone kills your kin, you are bound by duty to seek vengeance. It's not optional. It's woven into our legal system, our religion, our entire social structure." Sienna settled into the chair across from him. "That must make peace negotiations complicated. It makes them nearly impossible. Because by our law, I owe blood debt for every Zacrian killed by human forces. And every warrior in my fleet owes the same." He finally turned to look at her. "How does your species handle this? The need for justice versus the need for peace?" "We struggle with it too," Sienna admitted. "We have a saying, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. But knowing that intellectually doesn't make the desire for revenge any less powerful. I think the difference is that we've learned slowly, painfully, to separate justice from vengeance." "How?" "By remembering that the person who hurt us is also someone's child, someone's loved one. That they probably have their own justified grievances. That doesn't excuse the harm they caused, but it makes them human. Or in your case, makes them a person rather than just an enemy." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "When you held me in that cell, you could have killed me. By your own admission, you had legal grounds. But you didn't. Why?" Driven was quiet for a long moment, his gaze returning to the stars. "Because you looked at me like I was a person, not a monster. And for just a moment, I remembered what it felt like to be one." The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Sienna felt something shift in her chest, a dangerous warmth spreading through her ribcage. This was a man raised to be a weapon, trained from childhood in the arts of war, and yet here he sat, admitting vulnerability to someone who should be his enemy. "Tell me about your family," she said gently. "What was your life like before the war?" "There was no before," Driven replied. "The war began when I was 7 years old. My earliest memories are of combat training and strategic briefings. My father, the Emperor, raised me to be his perfect general, skilled, ruthless, unwavering in my loyalty to the sovereignty." "Is that who you want to be?" "It's who I am." But his voice lacked conviction. "Who I have to be, or who you're expected to be," Sienna countered. "Those aren't always the same thing." Driven's jaw tightened, and for a moment she thought she'd pushed too far. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed a short, bitter sound. "You're dangerous. Sienna Ward, you ask questions that unravel carefully constructed armor. Someone once told me that wisdom and foolishness aren't mutually exclusive," she replied with a small smile. "Maybe I'm both." The second day of their journey found them in the observation lounge again, this time reviewing briefing materials for the upcoming negotiations. But the conversation kept drifting from political strategy to more personal territory. "What drew you to diplomatic service?" Driven asked, setting aside a data tablet. "You could have chosen many paths. Why this one?" Sienna tucked her legs beneath her, getting comfortable. "When I was 16, my colony was caught in the crossfire of a border dispute. Not this war, a different conflict, already resolved. I watched neighbors who'd lived peacefully side by side for years suddenly turn on each other because politicians light years away told them they were enemies. It was absurd and tragic, and so utterly preventable. She met his eyes. I decided then that I would spend my life making sure other people didn't have to watch their worlds fall apart over manufactured hatred. And has it been worth it? All your efforts, all your idealism, and the wars continue. Every life saved is worth it. Every conversation that doesn't end in violence is worth it. Even if I only prevent one conflict, if I help one person see their enemy as human or Zacrian, that's still one more light against the darkness. She leaned forward. You know what I think? I think you became a warrior because it was expected, but what you really want is to be a builder, to create instead of destroy. Dreven's expression turned guarded. What makes you say that? The way you move through this ship. I've been watching you. She saw his eyebrow raise and hurried on. Professionally, I mean. You check on the crew. You know their names. Yesterday, I saw you stop to help a maintenance tech with a jammed panel when you easily could have walked past. That's not the behavior of someone who only values martial strength. Caring for my crew is strategic. They perform better when they know their commander values them. Keep telling yourself that, Sienna said softly. But I've seen your face when you think no one's looking. You're tired, Dreven. Tired of the killing. Tired of the role you have to play. You want this war to end as much as I do. He stood abruptly, moving to the viewport, his shoulders tense. You don't know me as well as you think. Maybe not. But I know the look in someone's eyes when they're drowning in expectations they never chose for themselves. Sienna rose and joined him at the window, careful to leave space between them. My father wanted me to be a military officer like him. He was furious when I chose diplomacy instead. Called it cowardice, said I was betraying our family legacy. We didn't speak for 3 years. Did you reconcile? Eventually. He was killed in a raid 2 years ago, but before he died, he told me he was proud of me. That it took more courage to talk to enemies than to fight them. She smiled sadly at the memory. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is disappoint the people who expect us to be something we're not. Dreven turned to look at her, and the intensity in his amber eyes made her breath catch. They were standing closer than she'd realized. Close enough that she could see the faint bioluminescence beneath his violet skin. Patterns that shifted with his pulse. You are a dangerous woman, Sienna Ward, he murmured. You make me want impossible things. Like peace? She whispered back. Like freedom. His hand rose, hesitating in the air between them, before gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. The touch was feather-light, but it sent electricity racing across her skin. Freedom to choose my own path. To be someone other than the weapon my father forged. Sienna's heart was hammering now, and she knew he could probably hear it. This was dangerous territory, crossing lines that should remain firmly in place between captor and captive, between enemies, between diplomat and prince. But she couldn't seem to make herself step back. Maybe you already are, she said. Maybe you've been choosing, little by little, every time you show mercy instead of cruelty. Every time you question instead of blindly obeying. Dreven's thumb traced the line of her jaw, and Sienna felt herself leaning into the touch, despite every logical reason not to. His hand was warm, careful, trembling slightly with restraint. I should not want this, he said hoarsely. Should not want you. It is forbidden, politically disastrous, and completely illogical. I know, Sienna breathed. I should hate you. You're everything I've been taught to fear. And yet, he echoed. The distance between them closed to inches. Sienna could feel the heat radiating from his larger frame, could see her own reflection in his dilated pupils. One of them needed to be sensible, to step back, to remember all the reasons this was impossible. Neither of them moved away. The ship's communication system chimed, shattering the moment like glass. Dreven stepped back quickly, his professional mask sliding into place so smoothly it was almost painful to watch. Prince Dreven, a voice crackled through the speakers. We are approaching Station Meridian. Your presence is required on the bridge. Acknowledged, he replied, his voice steady and emotionless. Then, to Sienna. We should prepare. The negotiations begin in 4 hours. Of course, she managed, though her voice sounded strange to her own ears. Dreven moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at her. Sienna, what almost happened here didn't happen, she finished for him. We both know it can't. Too complicated, too dangerous. Too many people counting on us to be professional. Yes, he agreed, but something in his expression suggested he didn't believe it any more than she did. Too many complications. But as he left, Sienna sank back into her chair, pressing her fingers to where he'd touched her face. The skin still tingled with phantom warmth. She was in so much trouble. And from the lingering look in Dreven's eyes as the door closed between them, she suspected he felt exactly the same way. Station Meridian was a marvel of neutral engineering, built jointly by 7 species specifically to host interspecies negotiations. The architecture reflected none of its creators' aesthetics, and all of them simultaneously, a deliberate choice to make everyone equally uncomfortable and equally welcome. Sienna had studied it in her coursework, but seeing it in person took her breath away. The negotiation complex occupied the station's central hub, with delegations housed in separate wings that radiated outward like spokes on a wheel. Security was intense. No weapons, no private communications, no contact between delegations outside official sessions. The rules were designed to prevent exactly the kind of backroom dealings that had sabotaged previous peace attempts. Sienna stood in the Zacrian delegation's preparation room, adjusting the formal attire Dreven's staff had provided. It was a compromise between human and Zacrian styles, flowing fabric in deep blue with silver threading that caught the light, cut to accommodate human proportions, but echoing the ceremonial robes Zacrian diplomats wore. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. You look beautiful, a voice said behind her. She turned to find Dreven in full formal regalia, and the sight stopped her heart. His armor was ceremonial platinum, inlaid with precious stones that traced the lines of his body, emphasizing the powerful build beneath. A cape of midnight blue hung from his shoulders, clasped with the royal insignia. His hair, usually pulled back practically, had been styled into an intricate series of braids that marked his status. He looked every inch the crown prince, and it was both magnificent and somehow heartbreaking. You look like someone who could end a war, Sienna replied carefully. Or start one. Let's hope for the former. He moved closer, his amber eyes sweeping over her with an intensity that made her skin warm. The negotiations will be difficult. There are factions on both sides who would prefer we fail. We must be cautious, appear completely professional. I understand. Do you? His hand rose, hovering near her shoulder, but not quite touching. Because I'm finding it increasingly difficult to remember why we can't, he broke off, frustration flashing across his features. This is madness. You're human. I'm Zacrian. Our peoples are at war. Even thinking about you this way is. I know, Sienna interrupted gently. Believe me, I've listed all the reasons in my head 1,000 times. It doesn't seem to help. They stood there, trapped in the space between what they should do and what they wanted to do, until a chime announced that the opening ceremony was beginning. The negotiation chamber was circular, with each delegation seated at equal intervals around the perimeter. Terran representatives sat directly across from the Zacrians, a deliberate choice by the neutral coordinators, to force both sides to literally face each other. Sienna recognized Ambassador Thorn, leading the human delegation, his weathered face set in hard lines that suggested he was here under protest. The first 2 days of talks were predictably tense. Both sides restated positions that hadn't changed in 3 years, speaking past each other in carefully diplomatic language that meant nothing. Sienna watched Dreven navigate the verbal minefields with practiced ease, never quite agreeing to anything, but never fully refusing either. It was exhausting political theater, and she could see the toll it took on him in the tightness around his eyes. On the third evening, the station coordinators announced a mandatory cultural exchange, event another neutral tradition designed to force hostile parties to see each other as people rather than enemies. Each delegation would present elements of their culture: music, art, food, dance. Attendance was non-negotiable. Sienna found herself in the Zacrian preparation area as their delegation readied their presentation. Warriors were practicing a traditional combat dance, their movements flowing and lethal in equal measure. Musicians tuned instruments that produced sounds she'd never heard before, complex harmonies that seemed to resonate in her bones. "It's called Kreshvara," Dreven explained, appearing at her elbow. He'd changed from formal armor into flowing practice clothes that allowed free movement. "The Dance of Seven Sorrows. It tells the story of our people's exodus from our dying homeworld, the journey through darkness, and our arrival at our current home. Every Zacrian learns it as a child." "It's beautiful," Sienna said, watching the dancers move through formations that told story without words. In the old days, before first contact with other species, it was also a courtship ritual. Warriors would dance to show strength and grace, to prove they could protect and provide. If two dancers moved well together, if their rhythm synchronized. He trailed off, and Sienna felt heat creep up her neck as she understood the implication. "Do you dance it?" "I'm required to lead our demonstration. It's expected of the Crown Prince." He hesitated, then added, "Traditionally, the lead dancer chooses a partner from those watching. To honor the witnesses, to show trust between performer and audience." Sienna's heart began racing. "You're not suggesting—" The coordinators believe that such symbolic gestures help build bridges. A Zacrian prince dancing with a human liaison would send a powerful message about our commitment to peace. His voice was carefully neutral, but she could hear the question beneath it. It would also give ammunition to anyone who wants to paint either of us as traitors. "Yes," he agreed. "It would be politically risky." "I wouldn't ask if—" "I'll do it," Sienna interrupted. "If you think it'll help the negotiations, I'll do it." Something flashed in Dreven's eyes: relief, gratitude, and something hotter that he quickly suppressed. "I should warn you, the dance is ... intense, intimate. The Zacrians in the audience will understand its significance, even if the humans don't." "How intimate are we talking?" "Very." He moved closer, demonstrating. "The dancers must maintain contact throughout, hand to hand, sometimes body to body. The movements mimic combat and courtship simultaneously. And at the climax of the dance, there is a moment called Vresh Kata, the breath exchange, where the dancers must—" He stopped, seeming to struggle for words. "Must what?" "Share breath. Face to face, close enough that your exhales become my inhales. It symbolizes the joining of two souls, the trust required to let someone that close to your most vital functions. Among my people, it's considered more intimate than kissing." Sienna's mouth went dry. "And you want to do this in front of both delegations?" "I want to show them that peace is possible even between those who should be enemies. That trust can exist where there was once only fear. But only if you're willing. I won't force." "Teach me the steps," Sienna said firmly, before she could talk herself out of it. "If we're going to do this, let's do it right." They practiced for 2 hours in a private room, Dreven patiently walking her through the flowing movements, the precise hand positions, the way her smaller frame would need to adapt to partner with his larger one. His touch was professional, correcting her posture, adjusting her stance, but Sienna felt every point of contact like a brand. "The key," he explained, is to stop thinking and simply feel. Let the music guide you. Let my movements telegraph where we're going next. Trust that I won't let you fall. That's asking a lot. Yes, he agreed quietly. It is. They ran through the sequence one final time, and Sienna felt something click into place. Their movements synchronized, her body anticipating his, flowing through the complex patterns as if they'd danced together for years rather than hours. When they reached the Vreshkata, standing face to face with mere inches between them, breathing in tandem, the air seemed to thicken with electricity. Like that? Driven murmured, his voice rough. Exactly like that. Neither of them moved to break apart. Sienna could see the patterns beneath his skin pulsing faster, could feel the heat radiating from him, could hear his breathing turn ragged. We should stop, she whispered. This is just practice. Yes, he agreed. But his hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. Just practice. Driven. I know all the reasons this is impossible. I've listed them too, tried to logic away these feelings. His forehead touched hers, and Sienna's eyes fluttered closed. It doesn't help. What are we doing? She breathed. Something foolish. Something dangerous. His lips brushed her temple, featherlight. Something that feels more right than anything I've ever known. Sienna's hands found his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart through the thin fabric. Every logical part of her brain screamed warnings about duty, about politics, about the impossibility of this connection. But her heart didn't care about logic. After the dance, she said quietly, we need to talk about this. Really talk, not just, agreed, he interrupted. After the dance. When we're not standing in a practice room where anyone could walk in. When we can speak freely without worrying about witnesses. His hand slid to the nape of her neck, sending shivers down her spine. But right now, in this moment, can we just ... He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Sienna understood perfectly. Right now, they could pretend that the universe wasn't conspiring against them, that they were simply two people drawn together by something neither of them fully understood. She nodded, and Driven's lips found hers. The kiss was everything it shouldn't be, and everything she'd been denying she wanted. Gentle at first, questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she didn't, when instead she rose on her toes to deepen the contact, Driven made a sound low in his throat and pulled her closer. His hands spanned her waist, nearly encircling it, holding her with a gentleness that contradicted his warrior's strength. Sienna had been kissed before, but never like this. Never with this sense of falling and flying simultaneously. Never with this feeling that everything in her life had been leading to exactly this moment. Driven kissed like a man starving, like someone who'd been denied tenderness so long he'd forgotten what it tasted like. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sienna rested her forehead against his chest. This is a really bad idea. Terrible, he agreed hoarsely. Possibly the worst decision I've ever made. But I can't seem to care. Not when you're in my arms. Not when you look at me like I'm someone worth saving instead of just a weapon to be deployed. His hand stroked through her hair. You make me want to be better, Sienna. To be the man you seem to think I could be. You already are that man. You just need permission to let him show. A soft chime interrupted them, the 5-minute warning before the cultural exchange was set to begin. They pulled apart reluctantly, Driven helping Sienna straighten her clothes and hair, both of them trying to compose expressions that wouldn't reveal what had just happened. Ready? He asked, offering his hand. Sienna took it, lacing her fingers through his. Ready. The cultural exchange hall was packed with representatives from all 7 sponsoring species, plus the negotiating delegations. Sienna spotted Ambassador Thorne in the front row of the Terran section, his expression already disapproving before anything had even begun. The Zacrian musicians struck up the opening notes of Kreshvara, and the combat dancers moved into formation. The music was haunting, building slowly from a single morning note to a complex symphony that spoke of loss and hope and determination. The dancers moved through the story of exodus and arrival, their movements telling of hardship and perseverance without a single word. Then came the moment Driven had warned her about. The lead dancer stepped forward, regal, powerful, every inch the crown prince, and surveyed the audience. By tradition, he could choose anyone, a member of his own delegation, a neutral party, even someone from the opposing side. His amber eyes found hers across the room, asking a silent question. Sienna stood and walked to the center of the floor. She heard the gasps, the whispered conversations, the sharp intake of breath from the Terran delegation. Saw Ambassador Thorn's face darken with fury. But none of it mattered as much as the way Driven smiled when she placed her hand in his. "Trust me," he murmured in Zacrian, a language she'd been learning but hadn't mastered. "Always," she replied in the same tongue, and watched surprise and pleasure flash across his face. The music shifted into the second movement, and they began to dance. All the practice paid off. Sienna moved with Driven as if they'd been partners for years, their bodies finding the rhythm instinctively. His hands guided her through spins and dips, never letting her stumble, always perfectly balanced. The audience faded away until there was only the music, the movement, and the man whose eyes never left hers. The story they told with their bodies was one of meeting, of conflict, of two forces that should destroy each other, instead finding harmony, of enemies who chose understanding over violence, of bridges built across impossible divides. Every Zacrian watching would understand the symbolism. Many of the humans would too. As they moved into the final sequence, Driven pulled her close, their bodies aligned, and Sienna felt her heart racing so hard she was sure he could feel it. The music built to its crescendo, and they moved into the Vreshkata. Face to face, breath to breath, standing so close that Sienna could count his heartbeats. Driven's hand cradled the back of her head, his eyes locked on hers, and they breathed in tandem. His exhale became her inhale, became his inhale, became her exhale. A cycle of shared air and shared space and shared trust that felt more intimate than anything Sienna had ever experienced. The world narrowed to just the two of them, to the impossible connection crackling between them, to the way his pupils dilated as he stared at her like she was the only thing in the universe that mattered. The music ended on a single, sustained note. They held the position for a breath, 2, 3, and then slowly separated. The applause was mixed, enthusiastic from the neutral parties, cautiously approving from some of the Zacrian delegation, stony silence from most of the Terrans. But Sienna barely heard it. She was still caught in Driven's gaze, still feeling the ghost of his breath on her lips, still trembling with the power of what they'd just done. "Thank you," he said softly, for her ears alone. "That was ... extraordinary." "It was just a dance," she replied, though they both knew it was a lie. "Yes," Driven agreed, his thumb brushing across her knuckles where their hands still touched. "Just a dance." But as they bowed to the audience and returned to their respective delegations, Sienna caught sight of Ambassador Thorn's expression and felt ice slide down her spine. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. In fact, she suspected it was only just beginning.